You're listening to Forward Faster, bite-sized insights for entrepreneurs.
The microscope still plays an important role for pathologists today. It does, however, remain principally an analog technology that is limited in today's interactive digital world. I'm here today with Brandon Buscaglia and Marcus D'Aguiar, clinical specialists at Augmentiqs, a company that is transforming existing microscopy into a smart, connected device useful for pathologists and hospitals everywhere. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's begin by asking a few questions. Can you describe Augmentiqs technology and the problems that you're trying to solve?
Yeah. So when Brandon and I ever explain sort of the problems that we address, we sort of try and do it sort of layered, sort of in the order of importance that how we address them. The first is sort of how you mentioned, how pathology, all it uses is the analog microscope. It's sort of the last field of medicine that's yet to digitize everything. So the first is the multi-directional connection between the computer and the microscope. We sort of put the computer into the microscope. We really digitize both the internal and external information you're getting from the microscope. So this allows for the extraction of images and things like that to actually take that information and analyze it and you really utilize the computer for it. And that sort of leads into the second problem we address, which is involves telepathology. So now that we've extracted this information, we can now share this information to anyone in the world. So for example, a pathologist in Israel, for example, if he has the Augmentiqs system, now has the ability to get consultation from a pathologist in Rochester, for example. So we really allow for the sharing of what you're literally seeing in the microscope to anywhere in the world. And we do this through an encrypted network. But that has opened up doors for collaboration, things like that. And then the final sort of problem we address is pathology is extremely subjective. So now we try to provide tools so that pathologists can sort of utilize these tools to improve their diagnosis, more accurate diagnoses. These tools are available to the pathologist utilizing our augmented reality feature. So this puts an augmented reality overlay right in the eyepiece of the microscope. And this has tools like accurate measurements, annotations, cell quantification, things like that. So with the subjective nature of pathology, we're trying to provide them with more quantitative methods of analyzing tumors and cancer and things like that. So overall, it's just like a novel platform for pathologists and anyone really using a clinical microscope to extract information and data and sort of add the digital component to pathology. You can say anything if you think I missed anything.
Well, I'll kind of reiterate what Marcus said. I think he did a great job. He touched on all three main points for what we really try to accomplish with Augmentiqs. And the 3 points are the multi-directionality, telepathology, and our software integration. So multi-directionality, just like Marcus said, it's not only taking information out of the microscope and digitizing images that you're seeing under the microscope, but it's also taking computer information and digital information and transferring it back into the microscope, providing quantitative software tools directly within the workflow of the pathologist, within their microscope. And then the second piece to it, telepathology. So now that we are able to take information in and out of the microscope, now we can transfer that not just within the pathology, the microscope that the pathologist is currently using, but now we can transfer that information all around the world. And we can do live consultations. Like he said, Israel pathologists can consult with a US pathologist in real time and see what's happening in their microscope environment. And then the third piece to it is, okay, now that we have this multi-directionality and we have the telepathology and we have a more collaborative pathology environment, now let's provide more useful tools within that environment. And that's the last step, is providing the quantitative software that makes the diagnostics more powerful. So yeah.
Excellent. So can you give me some examples or applications that this technology is used for? Maybe say how a pathologist would do or what they would see to make it a little bit more tangible to our viewers.
Right. So, so really, there's two main or fields or topics, I guess would be the right way to say it. Topics that we're building applications for. There's the near future, and then there's the long term. In the near future, we're building workflow improvement tools, diagnostic accuracy tools, and subjectivity decreasing tools. So, what does that mean? So, essentially, right now, when someone gets cancer and they get a diagnosis from a pathologist, the pathologist is basically looking at your tumor sample and making his best guess at what that tumor is and what the best treatment he thinks would have a good outcome for that specific tumor. We need to first build tools that help them make better interpretations, take the subjectivity out of it, provide them quantitative stain algorithms that tell them, instead of a pathologist looking at a slide and saying, I think 30% of this tumor is weakly this, for example, weakly HER2 positive. Now, instead of saying that, we have a quantitative tool that analyzes that image and says 32.6% of cells are weakly stain positive for HER2, and 62.2%, or whatever the numbers end up being, are moderately stained, and 1% is not stained at all. From that information, we can actually create more inclusive algorithms that take into account more variables, more information, and therefore make more informed decisions that will hopefully end up making better treatment outcomes for the patients. And then you have the long term. So that was all for the short term. That's all what we're building right now. But then we also are building for the future. So what is the future going to bring? Well, the future, we want to supplement a lot of those decisions. So right now we're trying to help the pathologist make better decisions, while in the future we can start predictive modeling of different features, different tumor features, different pathways or biological pathways that tumors can grow and interact within the body. And by having more predictive modeling with more data, and more quantitative algorithms like we're creating right now, these predictive models are only going to get better and more improved, and we'll end up, so right now we say, I think that this cancer is this, and I think that this is the best treatment. Well, 10, 20 years from now, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be this cancer is 99.2% similar to this category of cancers that got this treatment and had good outcome. So that is the treatment path that you are going to get. So it's going to be a huge change in the way we diagnose and treat cancers.
I just think one thing that we try to emphasize that I think a lot of other digital pathology tools fail to do is we're not trying to replace the pathologist. We are an assistive tool to their, what they're doing. So in no way are we going to replace them. We just, as pathology progresses, it'll get more into things like personalized medicine, things like that. And that's where, if we can provide accurate, quantifiable data and things like that, that's where that directly affects their treatment. Right. So in no way we're trying to replace the pathologist. We're just sort of an assistive tool. Yeah.
So, as I understand it, your equipment actually, your technology interfaces with existing equipment. So it's not a whole change out in the laboratory format. So can you tell me a little bit about that? And maybe are there some studies done on increased return on investment for people who have equipment in place and then use an Augmentiqs system to help? Can you tell me a little bit about how you do that and what the return is?
We currently have 3 places that we are beginning our ROI experimentation and validating our different areas which we can affect ROI. And again, the main areas that are being tested right now is with the telepathology application. That's the first thing that a lot of hospitals around the country and around the world really are interested in right now, and that's because you have this interesting problem that's being formed, and it's not just in America anymore. It's actually all around the world, and that is these conglomerate hospital systems being created. And we have a very good example of one in Rochester, in U of R. And so what ends up happening is you have one major hospital that ends up growing much larger than the surrounding hospitals, especially in rural areas and things like that, and they get absorbed into the hospital system. So U of R actually became a system of like 4 or 5 different hospitals. So right, so there's an affiliate system, with surrounding hospitals that all kind of are independent but rely on U of R, and especially the U of R laboratories. All your testing is being done, no matter what hospital you go to in any of the satellite locations, your testing is being done at the central location or at the central reference lab for that hospital system. So the main problem with these systems like this is you have to send specimens or pathologists between these different locations. And it is cumbersome, it is timely, and it is expensive. You can imagine how much it would cost to send a pathologist who's making $200,000 a year to a different hospital that's half an hour, 45 minutes away. It's a waste of money and time, and the pathologist's time, and someone else's time who needs a diagnosis. And minutes count, and they really do. And so, the specimen transfer also costs a lot of money. So the first application for ROI that everybody wants to look into is the telepathology, the idea that we don't need to send pathologists or specimens inter-location anymore. We can leave the pathologists, we can leave the specimens at the locations they're at, and the pathologists at U of R now can remotely call the microscope at FF Thompson and do a real-time diagnosis without being in the same location. So we do not need to send specimens anymore.
Is that for frozen sectioning that had occurred previously, or that they're going to section it, look at the data, and stick it in storage?
So in the current setting, in a frozen section, they will send the specimen to the pathology department. It'll get frozen. The tissue will get frozen into a block. It'll get sectioned, put on a slide, and the pathologist will do their best job at giving a quick interpretation of what that sample is. Now, in our situation, instead of sending the specimen all the way to the pathology department, we can have the tissue sectioned immediately in the OR, frozen, and put on a microscope, and the pathologists, wherever they are, because a lot of times the pathology departments are very far away from the operating room, they can just call the Augmentiqs device again on the pathologist microscope, and they can actually view what's happening in the OR in real time and give a real-time diagnosis. So you're talking about decreasing time spent in the operating room by, in some situations, hours, which is a huge difference in operating in the terms of operating room.
So currently, I believe this is still the case, when you take a pathology sample, I mean, there is a legal requirement that sample be stored for 20 years. It's frozen and stored, and there are reasons for that. Like, you may send something out for a biopsy and you need another sample, so you would take another slice and send it out. Or it might be 10 years or 6 years and there's some other pathology in the same patient or something. And that's all fine. I don't see that this technology is actually going to change that in a hurry. However, do you see, with the cataloging of digital information, the pressure to store samples being less, or?
Well, there is still a need to archive real tissue samples, and the reason for that is, like you said, if a patient, let's say a new test comes out, a new biomarker test, we've found a new biological pathway that we can target for cancer, and new drugs are being created, and there's a new test for it. Let's say that new biological pathway was found in breast cancer, and you had a breast cancer patient that had just received their treatment, didn't have an overall great outcome, and now they're 2 years down the road. Now the pathologist goes, oh, maybe I should test that patient for this biological pathway. Well, there's no tissue, so they would have to go back and have another biopsy, another excision.
And there may not be anything to biopsy.
Right. So
One would
this way
hope.
we can, so that's one situation. The other situation is just simply for research. We need tissue to do research.
That is very critical.
So you lose a lot of ability once you have just a digital image versus the actual tissue sample. So I don't think we're ever going to get rid of tissue samples completely, but there is a huge case to be made for the decrease in the necessity for archiving tissue samples, because we can now archive digital information.
Yeah.
Also, another thing we're doing in that topic is a new device that we are creating, which is a new motorized stage. So what this will allow us to do is precisely track the slide on the stage for what you're seeing in the microscope. So now we can do specimen mapping. So now in the situation of archiving digital information, we can not just archive the images, but we can archive the images with coordinates. So we can take a sample, map the entire thing, and now 10 years down the road when we want to do research on it or revisit a case, or a week from now they want to do a consult, whatever, they can put the slide on the stage and have a coordinate mapping system for everything in the digital archive. So there's an area of interest. Click on the area of interest. It will take you to that exact location on the slide.
Yeah.
So that's going to speed up the archiving and research process a lot too.
Okay. So last month, Augmentiqs paired up, and I hope I say this correctly. Is it IRA or AIRA?
I would say,
Area.
I say era. I feel like you say
IRA.
area. Yeah, but yeah.
IRA matrix to deploy an Augmentiqs system. You want to tell us a little bit about this clinical study and what you're doing, and
Yeah.
what do you expect the outcome to be?
Yeah. So I think it was either one of the first ever, or if not the first ever, artificial intelligence preclinical studies within the microscope. So it utilized our Augmentiqs device, and it reviewed fatty liver tissue and myopathy tissue, so damaged muscle tissue, I believe that is. And essentially what it did is it highlighted and pointed out and quantified quantified key areas of interest, all within the IP. So Dr. Niska was the actual pathologist who performed the preclinical study. So he would essentially put the slide under the microscope with the Augmentiqs device and utilize the algorithm. And within his IPs, the key areas of interest were highlighted in different colors and quantified for him. And it was sort of just a preclinical study to really get to sort of just get the algorithm working and show it worked. But while he was doing it, also integrated laboratory systems, that's the ILS. They're a research organization in Carolina. While he was utilizing the algorithm, they were also viewing him doing that live with the Augmentiqs system, so telepathology, which is pretty amazing. Dr. Niska commented on the ability to sort of have that overseas connection while he was doing it was amazing. But he was very pleased with it. He said if this could become a normal thing, it would really speed up time, and the whole quantifiable thing is huge because of all the thresholds and things like that. But yeah, I believe Aeromatrix presented the images and things like that at a conference in Germany. But as we get more and more involved with these research organizations and things like that, we want to try and do more and more preclinical studies. And yeah.
Excellent. So Augmentiqs was part of the second cohort of Luminate. We were very happy to have you as members. And I don't know if you can totally answer this question, because I know that it was Gabe, your CEO, who was primarily involved. But can you speak to what you got out of this program, what Luminate brought to Augmentiqs?
Right. So unfortunately, we did end up joining Augmentiqs in the second half of the cohort, and what I can really touch on from our experience with it is the overall professionalism and the amount of really good projects in the program that you can imagine actually having an impact on your everyday life. And seeing that is very inspiring, and being around that is is something that drives you to want to be that company. We want to be that company that people look at and go, wow, I could see that having a huge effect on my life. And having that push is something that really drives the company, and it was something for us too, because we've been very involved with entrepreneurial experiences in the past, and there was definitely something very different about the overall, I guess, feeling or vibe.
I was going to say that we've been involved in past on just in entrepreneurship in general and startups and things like that, but this is something sort of like the next level about this whole environment and everything. That's just professionalism, productivity, and just overall effectiveness, I think is.
It really is a mindset. A lot of entrepreneurship and coming up with new technologies is the mindset, and it's something that a lot of people can do. It's just being in the correct mindset to do it, and
Totally.
and Luminate definitely puts you in that mindset.
So are there other programs in the region that you've taken advantage of that you liked or seemed appealing to you?
Well, just through RIT, we're both biomedical engineers from RIT. It's a school that emphasizes sort of having an entrepreneurial mindset. Sort of, obviously it's pretty big engineering school, but they always try and get you thinking like that and everything. And they have an awesome amount of programs for that. So we were both pretty heavily involved with some entrepreneurship programs there. So going through that, it was almost sort of perfect timing. Sort of really got us in that mindset and got us involved in startups and things like that, and sort of worked out perfectly for when we met Gabe and got involved with Augmentiqs. So we sort of have some experience from those programs, and that set us up for, I think, success, mindset, work ethic, things like that.
And then the timing was impeccable with, so at RIT, we're currently going through the MSD program. Multidisciplinary Senior Design. So it's basically our capstone project for everyone else out there. We take an engineering concept and we spend 2 semesters building it. And a lot of colleges do this, but what we were blessed with the opportunity to present our own project, which not a lot of students get to do. We actually gave a pitch at one of the RIT entrepreneurial meetings. They invited us in to give us a pitch on Augmentiqs, and one of the RIT representatives who was at the meeting, who watched the presentation we gave, came up to us afterwards, and he introduced himself as one of the directors of the MSD program at RIT. And he goes, aren't you guys going through the MSD program coming up these next 2 semesters? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, do you guys have a project outlined or anything yet? And we're like, no, we're not really sure. And he goes, well, would you guys want to submit a project sponsored by Augmentiqs if you guys have anything that you guys are interested in developing for the company that you guys were planning on doing? And we were like, you know what, perfect timing again. We had just come up with this idea for the motorized stage device. And so through that program, we proposed that idea, and so right now it got accepted, and we are working on the motorized stage through the MSD program at RIT. So that was just another crazy timing.
It was almost like perfect timing. I think our deadline for submitting it was like
a week.
We had presented on like a Wednesday. I think it was like Friday. It had to be submitted. So it was like a perfect example of perfect timing. But
so that's just another program we've been fortunate enough to been able to take advantage of here in Rochester. And
so, do you have advice for up and coming entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, definitely after going through the RIT programs and learning sort of about Augmentiqs does and getting involved is definitely listen and talk to your customer. I don't think a company can really become a company if they don't have a customer. The customer is the most important part, obviously. So like prime example, Augmentiqs. That Augmentiqs does different than other digital pathology companies is they understand how pathologists work their workflow, their time is extremely important. We've noticed that just from working in the past 3 years, but they can't really take 10 minutes per case to go out of their way to use a device that's not even in their office or their lab. So we really paid attention to that and understood that. That's why we try to retrofit everything to the microscope and have it right there in their eyepiece. So definitely listen to your customer, because that should really affect how you develop your device and go about your company or your business. Because I don't think there really is a business without a customer. Yeah.
So let's flash forward 10 years. Where do you see Augmentiqs? What do you think? Where do you see life with Augmentiqs?
So this is my favorite topic, because there are some amazing things that could really come out of this.
Yeah.
Outside of just, as a whole, our main goal, we want to improve cancer diagnostics. We want to improve the lives of the patients around the world. But even outside of that, there's a couple really cool things that could end up being done with our technology. The first one being 3D modeling of tumors down to the cellular level. So you can imagine if we are able to precisely map specimens on slides, we can start compiling those images on top of each other, stitching them together into a 3D model of the cellular level. So we can work on creating virtual environments where you are literally looking at not just tumor morphology and pleiometric features and all that, but you're actually looking at the tumor environment. So so that's the one hand. We're going towards these 3D modeling and down to the cellular level. And then the other hand is we can basically create an entire new market, an entire new global market that doesn't exist yet, and a global market for remote telepathology. So you can imagine, and this is very futuristic, there are no more pathology departments at hospitals. There are pathology reference labs somewhere random in the world with hundreds of pathologists all working in one location, instead of pathology spread out between hospitals around the world. And these pathology consulting groups can be hired by hospitals to do and handle all of their pathology. So that's a really futuristic sort of situation, but we are creating the possibility for that. So those are the two things that I get most excited about.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing Augmentiqs with us and with our viewers today. It's a very exciting path you're treading, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is awesome.